Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Equity Conversations. My name is Tracy Lamb. I'm the Director of Programs and Communications at Partners in Diversity. Thank you for being here and taking part of Equity Conversations. The purpose of Equity Conversations is to provide space for healthy dialogue, collaborative learning, and sharing. And as you get settled, here are a few housekeeping items. The session is being recorded and will be sent to you after the event. However, the slides will not be made available. The chat box, as you can see, is open and super active. We ask that you keep the comments respectful and courteous. Today's event is also live captioned. To activate the feature, hover over the bottom of your screen and select the closed captioning icon. You'll also notice that we chose to use the meeting function of Zoom. This is so we can see all your beautiful faces and give you the opportunity to share in a more intimate way. So we ask that you keep your microphone muted until you're called upon. Please use the raise hand function on Zoom or post in the chat box. Now I want to invite you to attend these upcoming Partners in Diversity programs. In April and May, we are hosting a two-part Breakfast for Champions workshop focused on helping you design an equity impact roadmap. It will be a hands-on and will include small group work. Both sessions are in person with an option to attend virtually. In-person seating is limited. Details are available on our website. Then on May 10th, we are excited and super pleased to announce that Say Hey will be back in person. It is the largest multicultural networking event in the region. This quarter, the event will be held in Vancouver at Clark College. The link to register for these events are being posted in the chat box right now. And before I pass it on to Mari, if you can all please mute yourself, because I'm hearing some feedback. Thank you, appreciate that. So now here's Executive Director of Partners in Diversity, Mari Watanabe.
Hey, everybody. Thank you, Tracy. And in honor of Women's History Month, I would like to echo Tracy and welcome you all here today. So this month is about celebrating women's contributions to history, culture, and society. Of course, we all know that women kick ass every single day of the year, not just in the month of March. Throughout the pandemic, women have stepped up to do more to support employee well-being, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Couple that with heavy workloads at home and in the workplace, unclear boundaries, microaggressions, and sometimes work that goes unrecognized. No wonder that, according to a 2021 Women in the Workplace study by McKinsey and leanin.org, women are now significantly more burned out, more so than men. Despite all this, the report noted that women are rising up as strong leaders.
I'm reviewing her case. Have been since.
Okay, thank you. According to the same study, they are also more likely than men to practice allyship. And companies that don't recognize this and do not do anything about this, they will risk losing amazing talent. So because so many of us take on so much, we put together this equity conversation to remind you that it's okay to rest and let go and to say no. So today's discussion, Dare to Say No, the art of healthy personal and professional boundaries for women of color, will help you develop fundamental skills to set boundaries for ourselves and to start embracing no. We hope that this will all help you get time back, energy, and your wellness. So this session is made possible by our sponsor, the state of Oregon. And now here from the state of Oregon is Madeline Zeich, Chief Human Resources Officer. So Madeline.
Good morning and happy Women's History Month. My name is Madeline Zeich and I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer at the Oregon Department of Administrative Services. I'm honored to represent the state of Oregon as a sponsor of today's event. Within my role, I'm committed to strengthening our diverse workforce by implementing strong leadership to empower all women. More importantly, women of color not only belong in the workforce, but they must also have support from leadership, given the arena to thrive and obtain equitable resources, all while having healthy personal and professional boundaries. I'm thrilled for today's event and looking forward to hearing about how to embrace the word no while learning how to courageously and confidently set boundaries with others. On behalf of the state of Oregon and Partners of Diversity, I am pleased to introduce today's speaker. I'm really excited to hear from her today, and I think you will be too. Nadia de Ala is the founder of Real You Leadership, a facilitator in leadership and negotiation coach. Her passion is elevating people of color, women, and femmes to get the pay, positions, and recognition they deserve. Through her 6-month group coaching program, Real You Leadership and Workshops, Nadia supports her clients in making 20 to 55% more bank by teaching them negotiation mindset and strategy without compromising their core values and authentic selves. Please join me in welcoming Nadia de Ala.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Everyone, happy Women's History Month. So honored to be here and to get everybody to embrace saying no, right? So we are here for boundaries for women of color. I'm really honored to be here and present this work to you. And thank you, Tracy, for bringing us in and the whole team. So I'm going to have my chat to the left over here. So if you ever see me looking this way, I'm not being rude. I'm just making sure that I can keep up and make sure that if anything relevant comes up, I can help out. But we also have Claire Lumbang, my team member, who will be managing the chat for any Q&A and support there too. So community agreements before we get started is to hold space for the learnings of women of color. I see a huge turnout here today. There are more than a couple hundred here today. So excited to have that and all of you here. And this is designed by and for women and femmes of color. So if you are a non-woman of color as an ally, thank you. You are here to learn too. This helps all of us and hold space for who this was designed for as well. And if you don't relate to everything, that's okay. We want you to still be interactive in the chat, but don't be mean to yourself, to others. Some folks here might not be very good or familiar with boundaries at all. And we want you to be curious, as Tracy said, in the chat with each other and recognize positive intent, recognize impact as well. Right? So we are all here to learn. We are all here to grow. We are all here to take back our power with boundaries and create space for multiple truths. For instance, different opposing truths could be, I'm terrified of setting boundaries and I deserve peace and wellness and space, right? Multiple truths. It's never one or the other. Be conscious of binaries when we set boundaries that I'll be going through. And Vegas rules. If you've never been to Vegas, that's okay. But really, it's take the lesson, not the story. We'll be stopping recording for the Q&A session towards the end, just to make sure to respect folks' privacy. Make sure that if you recognize anybody and they happen to be courageous and vulnerable, we honor confidentiality. And if you want to send anonymous questions for the Q&A, you can go ahead and send a private DM to Claire later. So, or at any point, feel free and she'll collect them. So for this workshop, suggested mindsets that I ask you to lean into and embody are curiosity over judgment. So what that means is if you sense any sort of self-judgment or a memory comes up, or even a certain person or situation that you're trying to set boundaries with in this moment in time come up, instead of leaning on judgment, like, oh, how could I be such a pushover? What's wrong with me? Why can't I just say no? What we want you to do is lean on curiosity. So a reframe from that judgment might be, what do I want to do with this? How does this really impact me? What does setting boundaries from a powerful place actually look like? Those are much more effective questions when we can open up to curiosity versus staying stagnant in judgment. And I ask you to think about progress over perfection. I'm a recovering people pleaser here. I think a lot of women of color that we work with in Real You Leadership are. So what that tends to happen is create a sense of perfectionism. And we need to let that go and know that done, not perfect is good enough when it comes to setting boundaries and resetting them. And we ask that you have a beginner's mind and expert's practice and be open to career building being fun. So a little bit about us in Real You Leadership here. Whoops, this skipped a little bit. My name is Nadia de Ala. Again, go by she, her. I'm the founder of Real You Leadership. I am currently based in Ohlone Homeland, colonially known as Oakland, California, so Bay Area. Claire is here as well. And I am an ex-techie turned leadership and negotiation coach for BIPOC women and femmes. I also consider myself the closer of pay gaps, shatter of glass, bamboo, concrete ceilings, and lover of women of color leading the room. And a little bit more about me is that other things to know is that I'm a facilitator and speaker and boundary setting queen. So that means no matter how hard it is, I find my way to set boundaries that are really important to me. And I also help my clients get 22 to 55% more bang, sometimes even doubling that. And I'm the daughter of immigrants. Intersectionality matters to me, and my lived experience is very much informed by my parents who came from the Filipinx diaspora. And I also like to say intersectionality of body matters, especially for women and women of color, that I'm a 4'11 shorty Panay, which means Filipino woman. 4'11, that's really short. And I used to broker deals when I was in tech sales with $1 million deals, et cetera, with 6 foot something white male CEOs, CTOs, you name it. And they used to call me honey, sweetie, sweetheart, cute. You know, these things really matter when it comes to negotiating and advocating yourself and what it takes to move beyond that and own your power anyway and set boundaries when you need to. So I'm also the mother of cats, or as my mom likes to say, those aren't grandkids. Between Claire and I, we have 4 cats total. And Real You Leadership, we partner with our clients and support you to thrive as the real you in your career. Mindset, strategy, negotiation, fulfillment, you name it, we got you. And let me know if in the chat, if you see this skipping, this is not, for some reason, the slide deck is skipping. I apologize for the back and forth. Hopefully that smooths out in a second. But to be a real you leader is to be the leader you know you can be. So it is about being authentic, who you are, along with your core values that you align with, unapologetic, you have an elevated brand, you act from your vision, not your vantage point, and you advocate for yourself. And we help our clients thrive in really high demand, high impact organizations just like yours. And what that means is that you have to have boundaries with so many stakeholders in your life and in your work. And why we love to do what we do, our clients lift as they go. This is Jamie, the project manager and co-founder of Native Women Leads, who worked with us and was able to increase her pay by $30,000 and also advocated for her colleagues to receive appropriate compensation. That's why I love working with women of color, because we really leave the ladder that we climbed up for others to come through. We lift our hands and push and pull people up as we go along with us. And I love this because it wasn't just with women of color in tech. Jamie is in the nonprofit space. And Jackie, a financial service VP of project and project manager, was able to advocate for herself, set boundaries, and take up space, and said she was able to recognize a lot of her inner haters that I'll be calling out later. Inner haters are what I call self-sabotaging thoughts. Our inner critic, the things that hold us back from setting powerful boundaries. And when you recognize those, you can name it and move through it and unapologetically start embracing the word no. And this is Shantae, a productivity systems operations manager who really understood the power of when we do this work, when we start saying no to things, you start creating new possibilities. It's really hard to get over the things that might hold you back from setting boundaries. But if you choose to do the work, as Shantae said, you will see results too. So Real You Leadership, we teach our clients to go through this entire framework of being a radical visionary, activating your voice, which is mainly where we'll be focused on today, because what do you need when you set boundaries? You need to activate your voice. And expansive value, how you really expand in your value with your community and the spaces that you occupy. And what we'll cover today is why it's so freaking hard for women of color to set boundaries in the first place. And we'll also go over the 5 types of work boundaries you could be setting today. I think that it is really important to cover the actual framework of, oh, I'm not setting this boundary and this boundary and this boundary. People don't even realize sometimes that boundaries are being crossed and don't even realize what kind of boundaries we could really be creating and nurturing and reinforcing today. And we'll also be giving you a checklist to see if boundaries are even needed in the first place. And the recipe that we teach in Real You Leadership for Badass Boundaries, we'll be giving you 2 script templates to go off of, because you don't need to wing your boundaries. You can actually prepare and create your scripts in advance. And again, we'll have a Q&A. So let's get to the fun stuff now. And I am so excited for this. So no, this is about embracing the no. No is a full-on sentence, period. How comfortable are you with giving boundaries to people? And now I want to hear in the chat from you on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being, I am so comfortable with giving boundaries, 5 being, I don't know who boundaries are. What are they? On a scale of 1 to 5, where are you in setting boundaries? So 1 being freaking awesome, 5 being boundaries. Who is that? Woo! That is a lot. Here we are. Good morning, everybody. I love this. So great. We have some 2s. I love to see that. We have some 1s. I love that. So 1s and 2s, make sure you really realize when you see people being uncomfortable with giving boundaries, help them out. Give advice to your peers. Let them know where it's at. And also, I hope you can learn from this too and get to that next number. We have quite a few of 3s, 4s, and 5s. So thank you, everybody, for sharing in the chat how this is very courageous and vulnerable for you to bring forth this. So I really appreciate it. And look, everybody, you're not alone. A lot of people came here because they want to improve. And this is where we lean on our growth mindset. So now, next question, same scale, 1 to 5. How comfortable are you with receiving other people's boundaries, with receiving no? 1 being, I'm really comfortable with people telling me no. I'm really uncomfortable. I don't like getting rejected. I don't like receiving boundaries. And notice if there's a difference, right? Some people might be very different. Some people might be really comfortable giving, but not receiving, vice versa. Or you might be one and the same. What I find with most of my clients is that if you are afraid of giving a no and setting boundaries, chances are there's some inner part of you, maybe very deep or maybe very surface level, that also hates receiving no's. So really think about that. And it's okay if you got the skills mixed up, all good. And yes, some people said it depends, right? Of course, nuance matters. Situations are different. Sometimes you might not feel safe to set a boundary, and that's okay, right? Every situation, every person we'll be setting boundaries with in our personal and professional life will create different comfort levels. This can change on a daily basis, this rating, but this is where you're at right now. So let's see and be curious about what would help me get to a more comfortable number. What would help me get to a more empowered place where I feel great about setting boundaries, regardless of how it goes down. So the practice of setting boundaries are a form of self-love, self-respect, and self-care. I can't stress that enough. People think boundaries is just pure rejection of other people or letting people down. But first and foremost, boundaries are for you to take care of yourself, to have space for yourself, to honor your values, to say that I prioritize my wellness. So why boundaries can be tough, especially for BIPOC women and femmes, is that we are often conditioned or often programmed or believe that the needs of others come before my own. So if that's you, you're not alone. And we're often, when we find it tough to set boundaries, could be coming from a place of fear when we're making the decision on whether or not we set boundaries versus a place of our values, right? Am I making a decision to not set a boundary based on the people pleaser in me that I said I'm a recovering people pleaser for? Or what would it look like if I set boundaries for my values? My top two are love and integrity. And if I solely come from that place. And that's what we teach in our work, our trainings, and our client work. This is something that's really important to take the time to get out of your fear-based thinking and think from a place of your values. And a lot of times for women of color, we are avoiding retaliation, rejection, and even hurting others. No one likes to be rejected. So we are very fearful of even putting that on others. And we might not think we have a right to set boundaries, might not have authority to set boundaries, or not be in positional power where we can successfully set boundaries. And we also might be abiding by certain social contracts that we don't know we're technically operating under, and also systemic oppression that the organizers have alluded to very explicitly, saying that we face a lot of real systems that hold us back from our full potential. And also simply no one ever taught you how. I grew up in an immigrant household with my amazing Filipino immigrants and parents, and they were also very strict. There were no boundaries, there were no locks, there was no saying, hey, you can't talk to me that way. So imagine how being told, because I said so, because I said so, because I said so, anytime I tried to stand up or set boundaries with that, and in school, right? What that does, how that translates into my adulthood. So really be curious about what stops you from saying no, what stops you from giving no. And for women of color, we really get bland cookie cutter advice a lot of times that doesn't dig deep into the microaggressions that we experience, that doesn't dig deep or acknowledge gaslighting and biases that we face in the workplace. And it doesn't simply honor our roots, our ancestors, and the intersectional lived experiences of BIPOC women and femmes, and doesn't take into account the real you, that only you are, right? So Black, Indigenous women and femmes of color get our boundaries crossed all the time, at work, even at home. And it's who's familiar with this, right? We're not strangers to this quote. We work twice as hard for half the recognition, period, right? Work twice as hard for half the recognition. And it's not just acknowledging us. We get overworked, we get overextended, we overperform, regardless of what your title is, where you are in the contracted hierarchy, and we are underpaid. So when I say half the recognition, it's also half the compensation and half the amount of respect. So who here is done with that? Right? Who here wants to move beyond that and get what you deserve, not just the pay and compensations, which boundaries are another form of negotiations and advocating, but the recognition and the roles and the space and the safety that you deserve. And here's the deal. As women, we face situations that push us to conform to the male standard, the male norm. And as BIPOC, right, as Black, Indigenous people of color, we face the white-centered cultural and professional expectations. So we're pulled in different directions that can conflict with each other, that can be really complex when we're setting boundaries. So it can be difficult to navigate it. And nuance really matters here. It's not just our intersectionality around sexism and racism, et cetera. All of these intersectional identities that we can hold can come up and inform our lived experiences, inform and shape the biases that we navigate in the workplace. So really take into account everything that you have here. And when women of color set boundaries, why it can also be so difficult is we're not just focused on this situation at hand. We're also doing our best to not be called sensitive, for folks to not consider us the angry Black, brown woman, et cetera. Those biases, Some folks have told a lot of our clients when they finally set boundaries, you're not a team player. When they finally schedule a vacation, when they have maxed out PTO, right? Some of them have negotiated finally and said, this isn't good enough. Based on the market research, I'd like more. You're really difficult to work with here. You're aggressive, you're too much. And what that causes in the workplace is that a lot of times our clients, when they are told they are too much, they close themselves up in a box, they play small, and they become too little. And suddenly they're not leadership materials to get the higher upward mobility roles. So we're in a catch-22, a little damned if you do, damned if you don't, if you will, of how do we break past that? So when people can't understand why it's hard for us to set boundaries, this is at play in the background. It's a very big deal, and it can bring out a lot of our defense mechanisms and a lot of inner haters. And I see a lot of resonance in the chat here. Yes, to the current Supreme Court nominee. I had to shout that out. So great. And that is a real example of working thrice as hard for half the recognition and having to advocate for yourself and set boundaries when you need to, like she did very well during the interviewing. And so real external blocks here. We are up against real oppressive, binary, racist, and sexist systems that allow inequity to increase and increase and increase. If you look at the equal pay days for 2022 on anything like equalpaytoday.org, et cetera, those who do these studies, the pay gap for BIPOC women has increased, right? Has increased. Latino women, Indigenous women have moved all the way down to December, which means they have to work almost a whole entire year due to systems of inequity to catch up to the white male, non-Hispanic male's dollar from December 31st, 2020. We are truly at a disadvantage here. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say we can positivity this away. We have to take into account that this is real. And that's why I think that it is so important to take care of yourself when you set boundaries, to care about your wellness and to prioritize you first and foremost. Because what really happens when we're very scared to set boundaries or negotiate or advocate in any way is survival mode. And how do we set boundaries when we're in survival mode? How do we advocate for ourselves when you're in survival mode? It will look different for everybody, but I can tell you again that progress over perfection matters here. We don't have to get it perfect, and we do need to start. So let's go. Boundaries. When you set boundaries, this is really the process of finding, keeping, and nurturing your courage and your wellness, right? And it's also about the keeping that I want to say, because when someone crosses your boundaries, even when you set it, honestly, expect to continue to reset it. You don't stop being an advocate just at one go for yourself. You have to keep going. And boundaries are essential. Right? Boundaries are essential for healthy working relationships that are mutually beneficial, mutually impactful, mutually joyful even, and for healthy workplaces and workloads. So this is also critical in order to nurture and uplift our self-esteem, connect with our confidence. We must have boundaries, and boundaries with your time really truly create space for creativity to come through, for flow to come through. And there's time for rest, joy, and passion when we learn how to set more boundaries. And we also create possibilities and pathways towards stepping into our full potential when we set boundaries, our full career potential, our full leadership potential, our full earning potential. And we also have the ability to create paths towards our personal fulfillment. Not what our parents say. A lot of our clients who are women of color are setting boundaries with parents and grandparents and other family stakeholders for what they say is your version of fulfillment. Not what our team members say, not what our bosses say, et cetera. We create boundaries in order to clearly see what will make us fulfilled, what will help us get to our full potential. So when you set boundaries, remember, don't surrender to pressure. Give yourself permission. What is it that you have to or need to give yourself permission to do in order to set boundaries? It might be, I give myself permission to fail. What would that be like? I give myself permission to cry afterwards. I give myself permission for somebody to not like me if I set this boundary. These are the things that might scare you. And what might it be that you need to give yourself permission today? Think about it in order to start being a badass boundary setting royalty. Remember, right? So set and reset your boundaries is another thing, right? Again, expect your boundaries to be crossed by certain people over and over again, and keep resetting them. Ask for help if you need to, etc. And just keep advocating for yourself. Can't stress this enough. You are worthy of being your biggest advocate, of having your own back, no matter how this goes down. And let me take a moment to look in the chat here. Okay. Thank you, Claire, for helping everybody here. So when to set boundaries at work? The beginning, right? I like to tell our clients, set boundaries even when you're interviewing, right? You can ask your questions to your interviewers, to your hiring managers, just to really see, hey, how's work-life balance here? What's your take on work-life balance, especially when we have X type of projects or X deliverables or X deadlines? Start investigating where you might need to set boundaries, and maybe even say, oh, great, that's awesome, because I really value my time with my family afterwards. So I'm somebody who likes to keep it to the set 40 hours a week, right? Things like that you can advocate for. How did you handle the racial uprising after George Floyd's murder in 2020? Honestly, this is what we teach a lot of our clients to do. Or how do you handle or hold BIPOC communities when there is widespread racial trauma going on in the media? What do you do for your BIPOC employees? If these things matter for you, you can incorporate it from the very beginning. And if you are set in your company, in your organization, and you're not looking to go anywhere anytime soon, don't fret. It's never too late to create boundaries and start advocating for yourself. I know a lot of folks we work with get really nervous to start showing up as a different person, but really, no, you are starting to show up as the real you. So give yourself permission to shock people, to surprise people. If you've never set a single boundary for years and suddenly you're ready to, it's okay. Give yourself permission to do it. So now let's give into the 5 work boundaries, get into this. Time boundaries, material boundaries, physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, intellectual boundaries, right? This is so critical, and we're going to break down and give examples for every single one. So time boundaries, this is pretty obvious, I think, to folks. Like, are you setting boundaries on your time? Are you overextending and overcommitting and overwhelming yourself in any way? So what you need to know first and foremost is, what is my limit? How much can I really give right now? Are you in a deficit? Are you in the red when it comes to your time budget? So be clear on your job description. We're going to try to focus this mainly on career, but this can absolutely go in your personal time, because I know a lot of women of color that we work with are caretakers, whether they're mothers, taking care of their parents, taking care of grandparents, whether physically or long distance wise. I know that they are overgiving in other parts of their lives, etc. So be clear though, let's focus on career. Be clear in your job description and all your responsibilities. And when something truly gets out of your scope of work, when it is way out of hand, when you are doing way more than what you were hired for and what you're being compensated for. And understand that your time is valuable. When you really think about it, a lot of times those who are 4s and 5s, what activates are the people pleaser right here, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and hyperachiever. If I say no to this, they're going to find out I don't belong here. If I say no to this, they're going to think that I'm not good enough. If I say no to this, they're going to think I'm imperfect, or they're going to hate me, or they're going to think I'm greedy or not a team player. So this is really important to be aware again. Look out for these inner haters, these voices that might be stopping you internally and blocking you internally from doing the external work needed to handle the external challenges, the external barriers to what you really want. And a reminder to honor your values and wellness. I need more time back in order to be well. What would it look like to center your decision to set a boundary or not in time around that versus those voices that say, but will they think I'm not a team player? There's a huge, powerful shift when we can come from a more values aligned place. So time boundaries could look like saying no to weekend work, saying no to after 5 p.m. emails and DMs. Who here goes and checks their email or their Slack line or whatever internal communication system you have after 5 p.m. when you're eating dinner, when you're with your kids, etc. So you can also say no to tasks outside of your job description and honor your PTO, vacation time, sick leave. I'm referring back to a client who said that she was maxed out in PTO for over a year and was scared to take time off because her team and her were so busy. She didn't want to feel like she was leaving her team behind. We're not going to do that. Right? We're not going to overextend ourselves. We're not going to not use our benefits. We are going to use what's part of our total compensation package unapologetically here, right? And time boundaries could be with helping managing your workload and tasks and responsibilities, as well as if people are making you do office chores or not, right? As we re-enter, I saw someone saying that they're excited. It's their first day back into the office. This is actually very scary for BIPOC women and femmes, right? For Black, Indigenous women of color, a lot of us are scared to go back there where physically our bodies will be there again, right? And we will have to set certain boundaries. We will suddenly experience certain biases. That's the reality that we weren't experiencing when our bodies were in a little screen like this, right? And we might be told to get the coffee. We might be told to be the note taker. We might be told to be the ones that organize the potluck or order the food for lunch versus our white male counterparts, for instance. So these are things to look out for time boundaries. Here are some examples. So scripts. When you're getting your scripts, you can always refer back to this. Sure, I can lead that project. Let's look over my current priorities and deliverables and see what can be deprioritized for now or delegated to someone else so I can take this on, right? We're examining what's here. I'm happy to take that up. If we can take something out here, help me. In our negotiation modules and trainings that we have for Real You Leadership, we always talk about inviting collaboration in when we negotiate, including negotiating boundaries. Help me take on this project by telling me and working with me to see what else can be deprioritized, because I'm not adding an extra thing on unless we take out something. And this might be great if you're taking on a role or responsibilities when folks are actually not paying you more outside of your job responsibilities and job description. This is something one of our clients used and was able to get a 10% pay increase. So since we're not backfilling this role and I'm taking on more senior responsibilities, I'd like to discuss getting a pay adjustment. Not a pay raise, but a pay adjustment for the extra additional senior responsibilities I'm taking without an adjustment in the title or role. So these are ways you can set boundaries on your time. And material boundaries now is number 2. Could be food, could be meeting rooms, could be office supplies, could be money. So know your limits, know what's not okay for you, and know what you can do. And honor your values and wellness as well during here. And of course, look out for people pleaser, which might come up, hypervigilance, which means super defensive, The controller might be, oh, when it came to meeting rooms, I had a huge controller because people used to steal those all the time when I was still in corporate, right? Before I started my business. And look out for the perfectionists here too. So for material boundaries, a lot of folks might be asking for people to buy Girl Scout cookies or candy bars or do this Christmas fundraiser. And when you're in a huge office or a huge team, even if you're giving $5 here and there, sometimes that adds up. I've had coworkers and colleagues before that felt really embarrassed to say no when it was only $5, but they were single mothers or they were saving up for a vacation and likely completely underpaid compared to some of their other counterparts, depending on how equitable their compensation was. So it was really hard for them to set a boundary around that. So this one is an example of saying, I'm happy you're helping your son out with his fundraiser. I can't give anything at this time. Pause, right? You don't need to over-explain. You don't need to say why. This is our version of saying a little bit extended of a no without giving further explanation. I can't give you the conference room. I booked it a week ago, and this meeting is important too. Pause. Right? What happens a lot, hypervigilance or perfectionism or controller will have us, or people pleaser will have us over talking, over running our mouth, and we don't have to. We can be very simple, concise, direct, no apologies. So next is physical boundaries. This is very important as women and as BIPOC. So personal space, privacy, touch, physical body. Hugs versus handshakes, for instance, especially in the time of a pandemic. Remote work versus in-office work. How you dress, how your hair is, your external appearance, sharing personal life or not, if your Zoom video is on or off. Clearly define your preferences when you're considering setting physical boundaries, as well as your comfort level and your limits. And notice how your body really experiences this when you are setting it. You might feel tense in your stomach. You might feel a denseness here. You might feel your throat dry up, right? So really notice where you need to give extra self-care and love to when you're setting these. And of course, look out for the inner haters, people pleaser, hypervigilant, and the controller. So some examples. I'm more of a handshaker or a fist bump person. Bring it in, right? No, I don't want you to touch me like that. I told you before, I'm a 4'11" shorty panai, and I had a coworker who was a non-woman of color. She patted my head one day when I was typing on my computer and smiled at me and patted me on the head. Don't know if it was supposed to be like a child or a cute animal. And she smiled and said, "You're so cute," right? What is that? So this is where you can simply say, I don't want you to touch me like that again. And that is exactly what I did. So this will happen a lot to women of color, actually. And another physical boundary that we could set is, my eyes are tired from too many Zoom calls. I need to turn my camera off for this meeting, or can we just have a good old-fashioned phone call? So it's okay. Give yourself permission to ask for what you need, again, for your wellness, for your values, for yourself. So emotional boundaries is the next one. I think that a lot of these can intersect and be aligned. Emotional boundaries likely will be activated for any of the 5 boundaries total, right? When our physical boundaries are set, likely an emotional boundary, or when our physical boundaries are crossed, likely an emotional one will be dishonored or disrupted as well, right? So be in tune with your emotions and feelings, respect and honor your feelings and energy, and be clear on how much emotional labor you can actually take on, because this one is very complicated. If someone asks something that truly hurts us, it might be more damage to you in that moment or ever to call that out and to set boundaries when it comes to certain emotional boundaries. And we want to be able to discern when it's not worth the emotional labor that we're already likely taking more on than we should. So notice when you do feel guilty, notice when you do feel shame, notice when you are upset and undervalued, and how that experience is in your body when your emotional boundaries are crossed, and take time for yourself to really reset, to come from a place of your values versus any of the guilt, shame, upset, etc. And look out for the people pleaser, the hypervigilant in you, the victim, or the imposter. And here are some examples. When you keep changing our one-on-one meetings or showing up late to our one-on-ones, I feel upset and undervalued. I'd like to understand how we can prioritize and be excited for our meetings again, right? So another one is, hey, I love that we can confide in each other, but sometimes I'm in a place where I can't take it all in and be present with it, right? Could we check in with each other to see if we have space before we vent with each other? This is for people who love a good gossip train at work and don't have space for that, because it actually can oftentimes negatively impact us or how we show up in our expertise or as leaders in the workplace. Another one, when you take my professional feedback personally instead of constructively, it makes me feel like I have to walk on eggshells with you. How can we best move beyond that initial reaction? So do you see how in these last two examples, this time instead of a no, we're using open-ended, clarifying, and collaborating questions, right? We're asking to collaborate with me, work with me, right? We want to move through this together, and it's not just my responsibility. We design that together when we ask questions like, how can we best move beyond this? So when you get angry like that, it feels like we don't trust that we don't have each other's best interest at heart. What's the best way we can move past that? Another example here. And the final one, intellectual boundaries. These are centered around your thoughts, ideas, and curiosity. These are, when they are healthy, you have respect for the ideas of others, and others have respect for your ideas. When it's unhealthy, your ideas are disrespected, dismissed, and often even stolen. So for this, really take time to discern between what's harmful, truly harmful when your intellectual boundaries are crossed, or what's a difference in opinion, because those bring up different conversations. And look out for the people pleaser here, hyperachiever, as well as the perfectionist here. Examples. I can respect that we have different opinions. No need to go further if you don't have to. Thank you for affirming the plan and ideas I shared earlier. I'd like to share more details and expand on my original thought now. This is for if someone happens to take credit for an idea that you might have already mentioned. It's normal that we don't agree on things, but I won't let you shoot down my ideas in a belittling way. I'd rather we be more productive and constructive with our criticism to move towards effective dialogue and solutions together. What do you think? Pause. Right? So these are examples. Do not wing setting boundaries, especially when there's an emotional charge to it. Take time to actually write out exactly what you want to say. And now I'm going to share the recipe for badass boundaries we teach in Real You Leadership, as well as a couple templates you can work off of. So clarity on non-negotiables and values. Step 1. What are you not willing to do? What needs to happen? And that defines in number 3, define what needs to change. You also need to recognize and understand your feelings around this and give yourself permission. I've been saying that quite a lot. Give yourself permission to do it. Be clear, direct, and unapologetic. Don't wait. It's okay to not set boundaries in the moment, especially when we're hurt or something activates in us that wouldn't be effective to communicate from that place, it's okay to circle back, but don't wait 6 months to a year to set a boundary. If it's within a couple weeks or a month, feel free to circle back and say, hey, I've taken some time to really think through this. I didn't feel comfortable or courageous enough to say it, but now I do. I'd like to talk about this, right? And slow it down. If you send yourself over talking or overrunning or sprinting towards setting a boundary, slow it down and recognize impact over intent. A great way to say boundaries is, hey, I know you likely came from a good place. Your intent was good, but here's the impact it had on me. And here's what I'd like to happen moving forward. And make space for challenges, pushbacks, and failures, and celebrate yourself. That's why we celebrate ourselves. As BIPOC women and femmes, we don't get celebrated enough by society, by our families, and even by ourselves. So celebrate yourself no matter how hard it was, even if you cry, even if you spiral for a little bit, celebrate yourself for taking a step forward towards advocating for yourself. And when you might need boundaries, here's a little reference. Check if you feel resentment or anger towards someone. Check if you feel anxiety around certain people. Do you feel guilty for saying no? Do you overtalk and explain? Are you moody in the moment, irritable, or easily annoyed? You stay quiet or hide your ideas and thoughts? You conform or adjust your personality in any way? You feel overwhelmed, burnt out, or drained? You have a hard time knowing what you want? Your relationships deplete you versus fill you up? If any of this is a yes, you might need a little boundary or some big boundaries. So always reference to this little checklist if you're thinking, something might be here. Do I need a boundary? And always be open and honest and clear with your team and stakeholders about your boundaries. It gets easier the more and more you start to do this and practice this. And a reminder that when you do this, the controller might want to come out and say, if I can't do this perfectly, if I can't control the outcome, that they're going to receive this exactly how I need them to, then I might not do this. No, you are only responsible for your actions, emotions, and your responses. And you are not responsible for how someone reacts or responds to your boundaries. Stay out of people's pockets, we say in negotiations. Like for financial compensation negotiations, we say stay out of their financial pockets. Stay out of people's emotional pockets here. And sorry, not sorry. Apologize if you truly messed something up, right? Like it's okay. If you messed up something, apologize. And if you didn't mess anything up, don't say sorry for having boundaries. Don't people please or over explain in any way. So, when you set boundaries, practice makes progress, progress over perfection. Negative reactions from others equals the boundary was really necessary. And just remember again, if you have to reset boundaries, that's okay. Relapses from the other person crossing your boundaries doesn't mean you failed or aren't good. Keep at it and practice curiosity over judgment. So template number 1. If you, then I will, ... 2 examples. If you want me to take on that project, then I will need to deprioritize another deliverable. If you keep telling me that my ideas aren't good without giving me guidance to improve, then I will need to reevaluate our working relationship together. Template number 2. I really value, appreciate, prefer, whatever insert, plus insert clear value and preference here. Number 2. So I need, want, ask you to insert action from the other person here. In order for insert clear value and preference of impact here to happen. How that could look like. I really value having uninterrupted workflows during my day. So I ask that you start emailing me your last minute requests instead of walking up to my desk or pinging me at the end of the day in order for me to focus on my priorities I have set for the day. What do you think, colleague? Right? So let's pause there when we make our asks. So I have a couple challenges here. I challenge you to collect no's this week. For the next week, collect as many no's as possible. Normalize both giving and receiving no's, and keep a growth log if you want to do that extra mile for yourself. Okay, here's where I said no to the barista when they gave me the wrong milk. Here's where I said no when my hairstylist cut my bangs wrong and I almost didn't say anything and I almost just took it and left. Here's what worked well. Here's what didn't work. What will you do differently next time? Ask yourself those questions. Be curious about how you can continue to grow even 1% more every day, every week in setting boundaries. It's like a muscle, right? You got to do more reps in order to build that boundary setting muscle. So this is also, again, for your bottom line. We have a client here that negotiated 55% increase in salary and 10K signing bonus and said negotiations, including setting boundaries, are so closely tied to your confidence and your upbringing and identity. So again, mindfulness and self-awareness here is really important. And knowledge is power. Awareness is the first step to distancing ourselves from mindsets that stop us from self-advocating and showing up powerfully. So again, really keep track of what stops you internally from doing the external work, right? What stops you internally from setting boundaries? So Claire's going to drop a couple links for quick and dirty market research in case you do have a negotiation coming up or prepping for performance reviews or annual reviews and want to get your market right because we care about closing the pay gap. And here's a negotiation script makeover to take out apologetic language from your scripts. So you can go ahead and sign up for these to receive a download link. And this is something that you'll have available that you can actually use for not just compensation negotiations, but take out apologetic language when you prepare your boundary setting scripts. And I just quickly wanted to invite you to apply if you are a BIPOC woman and femme for our group coaching program. That's a 6-month group coaching program called Real You Leadership. This is one of 30 plus lessons that we have available alongside group coaching, as well as one-on-one coaching elements, as well as a weekly pre-recorded coaching and an online community. So this is really about breaking cycles of people pleasing, fast fixes, overwhelm, burnout, low confidence, and creating new cycles that empower and really elevate you and center your fulfillment. And again, you get all of this. So I just want to go through just a couple testimonials of our clients who are real people advocating for themselves, getting maximum pay increases, and setting badass boundaries to be able to build stronger relationships with coworkers and actually find fulfillment here. And you can connect with Claire as well as myself here. And I really want to thank you all for going with me on this journey and Claire on this journey for Real You Leadership. Thank you so much. I hope we can stay in touch. And thank you again, Partners in Diversity, for bringing us in. Thank you to the sponsors. I really appreciate it.